will call to order the Finance Committee meeting of Monday, August 28th, 2023, and ask staff to please call the roll.
Council President Curry.
Here.
Alder Verveer.
Here.
Alder Bidever.
Present.
Alder Madison.
Here.
Alder Evers.
Here.
Alder Rummel.
Present.
Mayor, you have quorum.
Thank you. All right. Our first item is public comment. We have one registrant in general public comment, Terrence James Harvey of Wyoming, Michigan. Do we have Terrence?
Looks like Terrence is not on with us.
Okay. Then we will move on to disclosures and recusals. Are there any disclosures or recusals on today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll go on to the consent agenda. Items 13 and 14 are discussion items, so we will exclude them from the consent agenda. Do any members of the body have other exclusions? Alder Rummel.
I would like to exclude number 12. I have questions.
Number 12. All right. Are there any other items that members of the body wish to have excluded from the consent agenda? Seeing none, then President Curry, a motion on the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Move to approve the consent agenda of items 2 through 11. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve. Is there questions, discussion? Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of items 2 through 11 and the recommendations as noted on the agenda. And then on item 12, Legistar 79072, amending the police department's operating budget regarding Burn Memorial Justice Grant. President Curry, a motion, please.
Move to accept.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded to accept. Alder Rummel, questions?
Yeah, thank you, Chair and Mayor. I would just like to ask the Chief to provide us some more details about what are the law enforcement initiatives these funds would be allocated to. There was no information in Legistar.
Looks like we have Assistant Chief Patterson here.
Hi. Hey, John.
Hi, Alder. Thank you for the question. So this is an annual grant, as you know, and you probably remember. This year, our proposal is to use a good portion of the funding for civilian overtime, which will be used in our records section. Believe it or not, we still have almost 3,300 reels of microfilm that have been sitting around for a long time, if you remember that from years ago. So we're going to go through these. A lot of them are in violation of our retention schedule, so they need to be destroyed. Some of them need to be saved and digitized. So this will allow overtime to go through those records. Will ultimately, we hope, reduce some of our operating costs. If we don't have the records, obviously they can't be requested and produced through public records requests. So hopefully reducing the workload of that staff. And then we have a lot of paper records as well that need to be gone through and again need to either be digitized or discarded. And then a portion is being used for equipment as well. So for some voice actuators for the special events team that is addressing one of the Quattrone recommendations from a couple of years ago.
President Curry?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hi, JP. My question is, what is an actuator?
So a voice actuator is It's about the size of half of a soda can, and it affixes to the front of a gas mask. So if a police officer or a supervisor is wearing a gas mask, I mean, essentially, if I covered my mouth and nose right now and tried to talk to you, that's what it sounds like without the voice actuator. But once you put the voice actuator on, it allows a person in the crowd or another police officer to hear what the person is actually saying.
Thank you. And so like a special events team, would that be like a team that's called in for, I don't think we do Freak Fest anymore, but like some of those sanctioned activities? So like it possibly someone that's going to not try to get like exposure to the elements or et cetera?
This is the special events team it's a team of about 80 officers, and it's a collateral assignment. It's officers who sign up to work major events. So they work like the Mifflin Street student party or the spring student party. That's now the major one. They've worked Freak Fest in the past. Some of them will be out Halloween this year, but any major event or like protest events as well, they may be working. So it's really to facilitate communication with people who may be in a crowd or with one another so they can understand what's being directed and what's being said.
Thank you. Last question on the voice actuator. So it doesn't do anything regarding transmission of COVID?
No, it doesn't filter at all. It just basically amplifies the officer's voice. So when they talk into their radio or they talk again to anyone in the crowd or one another, you can understand what they're saying. Because without it, it's muffled. It's very hard to understand.
Okay, thank you. I was just looking at the breakdown and I don't think I had heard that term before. And I'm glad to hear movement on the records consolidation, knowing that that's been a long need and still needed. I guess it's not, maybe more of a comment than a question, but looking at, since it's a joint initiative or it requires the county and the city to submit an MOU, looking at the counties, how they are proposing to use it, drug treatment courts, some actual victim crime response program for victim witness services. I know that you all know best about what your budgetary needs are, but is there any consideration to use these funds for any type of treatment related programs like mental health or AOTA for the city?
No, that's a good question. We've looked at some service partners in the past, and I would have to go back to tell you exactly how they've been allocated in the past, but we have done some partnerships in the past with this fund. The victim witness funding and the drug court funding has really just been there every year, and they really do depend on those funds. So we haven't explored changing, that portion of the allocation at all.
Thank you. It completes my questions.
Thank you, Alder. Other questions on item 12? If not, it's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing none, is there objection to recording unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, that item will pass. And we'll go on to item 13. Christine?
Thank you, everyone. Let me just get my screen set up. Great. So this afternoon, we'll be presenting a quick update on the use of American Rescue Plan Act funds, or ARPA. One quick note, the presentation will be focused on the state and local fiscal recovery funds, or SLFRF portion of ARPA, which is the funding the city received directly from the Treasury to address the negative impacts of the pandemic. ARPA was a very broad-reaching law that included many components, and funding was passed through many federal agencies such as HUD and FTA. This presentation, again, is just looking at the money that the city received directly. So I will start with an overview of the funding received and our expenditures to date, as well as reviewing some of our reporting requirements. And then the majority of the presentation will focus on programming updates from the departments who are actually utilizing funds. We won't talk about every program that's included in the project plan that was adopted by the council in 2021, but we'll give highlights about most of the items. Today we have with us representatives from Public Health, EDD, and CDD who will each speak to their specific items. And the order of the agency presentations will be Public Health, Environmental Health on the PFAS education and outreach, Public Health Violence Prevention, Economic Development, and Community Development. So for staff who are presenting, I'll call on you as your slides come up. And if you have multiple slides, let me know in advance and we'll be available for questions. As a reminder, the city received $47.2 million in ARPA SLFRF funding. Funding was dispersed in 2 installments, with the first half received in May 2021 and the second half in May 2022. The timeline for using the funds is the first deadline is the funds must be obligated, which means committed through a purchase order or contract by the end of next year, December 2024, and must be fully expended by the end of 2026. When the city first received notice of receiving these funds in 2021, internal recovery teams developed proposals for how to address the negative impacts of the pandemic with a focus on individuals and communities who are disproportionately impacted. And there was also a financial analysis on the economic impacts to the city, specifically around lost revenues. And in the end, staff developed a proposal that split the funding almost evenly between funding for community services and government services. And this plan was presented to the Common Council and adopted in July of that year. And the split ended up being $22.8 million in community investments. That includes funding for affordable housing, homeless services, small business recovery, and other needs, and $24.4 million for government services that have been used as a one-time source to close operating deficits, as well as stabilizing Monona Terrace and the Room Tax Fund. So as part of receiving this money, we have a lot of federal reporting to do. We submit quarterly expenditure reports to the Treasury, as well as an annual recovery plan. If you go to cityofmadison.com/ARPA, you can access all of our reports. The quarterly reports, we have 7 posted so far. The most recent go through June 2023. And these are snapshots of expenditures and applications by project with a brief project description. The annual reports have much more detailed information about the projects, include output and outcome measures by project. So far, we have 3 posted. The 2023 report, the feds are on a different fiscal year schedule. So the 23 report covers activities from July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2023, and was submitted at the end of July, so just a month ago. And this was a report that was attached to the Legistar file and was included in your packets. And the rest of the data that we'll present about expenditures and projects are based on these latest reports. So the actuals go through June 30th. There's been a lot of activity going on this summer. We think there are about $1 million in additional actual expenditures that have happened in the last 2 months. And you'll see all of that in the next report that is due at the end of September. So as of June 30th of this year, 11 of the community investment projects have been active. So of the $22.8 million budgeted, $8 million has been encumbered or expended. This includes $6.7 million in expenditures and $1.3 million obligated through contracts or purchase orders. In the table below, the projects are grouped by priority area, which is what we used when we first developed our ARPA plan, and how the expenditure categories are grouped in our reporting, in our federal reporting. It doesn't strictly fall into agency updates that will, the agency order that we'll use in the rest of the presentation. So that's just how we came up with this list. In terms of our revenue replacement and government services, which is this last row, we have expended about $20 million to date. We used $6.9 million in 2021 that was appropriated in the mid-year and year-end resolutions. In 2022, we used 13.1 million in the executive budget and the adopted budget to close the operating deficit. And in the 2024 budget outlook that we presented to the council, we proposed using the remaining 4.4 million as part of closing the structural deficit. In total, we've expended or obligated about 60% of the allocation. Most of this is expenditures in the revenue replacement category. But when we look just at the community investments, we've expended 35% of the total budget. When we look at other cities, this is pretty typical in terms of the pace of spending. We looked at St. Paul, Minneapolis, Milwaukee, and they're all their actual expenditures are between 38 and 58%. So our pace of spending is on par with comparable cities. So the next few slides have the budget encumbrances and actuals by agency. Again, so it doesn't perfectly mirror the table earlier, but here we have community development, all of the projects related to affordable housing and services for residents who are homeless. And each of the lines here shows a project. The dark gray total amount at the very end is the amount that we budgeted. If there's a light gray line, that's the total actuals to date. And the blue section is what we have encumbered but haven't expended. And the data label shows the cumulative amount of actuals plus encumbrances. So in the case of unsheltered homeless support, we've expended about 3.3 million. We have an additional 200,000 obligated for actuals and encumbrances to total 3.5 million, and our total budget is 5.5 million. So that's just how to read the charts going forward. And this, just noting that this grouping of projects is the largest category that we have within our community services. It accounts for about 15.3 million of the 22 million. And then this next grouping is also within the community development division, but focused on the community services activities. So here we have youth employment and engagement, which is within the violence prevention and youth engagement category, services to residents who are undocumented, healthy aging, education and engagement, and connection to basic needs. And as I mentioned, the reports are through the end of June, so it doesn't reflect all of the summer activity. And we know that the actuals, for example, in youth employment are much higher just from the last 2 months. And so we'll be working on those reports to publish sometime in the fall. Within economic development, all of these projects all roll up into the priority area of neighborhood and small business revitalization. And the largest project is expanding the Small Business Equity and Recovery Program that was established in prior capital budgets. And Matt and his team will talk more about these items in their update. In addition to SBER, you'll see other programs and projects that are more targeted for things like neighborhood business district support, retail building improvement grants, and others. And then within public health, these items span both emerging needs and violence prevention. We have funding for the roadmap to prevent violence, so 1.2 million in violence prevention initiatives, 100,000 in PFAS education and outreach, and funding to support the CARES program in terms of evaluation. So that was the quick overview of all of the various community investments, and then we'll get specific programmatic updates from each of the agencies, starting with public health, environmental health. So Bonnie.
Thank you. So I am going to be presenting for John Hausbeck, who is on a much needed vacation. And my name is Bonnie Koenig, and I'm the Director of Environmental Health. And with these funds, our initial focus from these grant funds was to improve the information we were giving people in our community. And we're really striving to be that trusted source of current and accurate information. The website was updated and now is focusing on clarification and getting people the information that they need and where it's needed to be within the website. We also heard from community members that they wanted more easily understandable information. So we have now created a 2-page document, a fish advisory document that is based on the Wisconsin DNR advisories. And so often people respond to videos. So we also prepared an informational video capitalizing on the excellent resources of the Madison City Channel. And the video is available in English, Spanish, and Hmong. And we are working with the local media focused on reaching Black and Spanish-speaking members of the community. And lastly, we're so grateful to have hired Chi Tao. He is here as the subject matter expert this evening, and he is our PFAS specialist. He's been doing so much of this work, digging into the materials, helping us move forward in this community engagement RFP, and connecting with our community groups, and starting many one-on-one shoreline conversations with anglers in our community. So it's been a long time coming, but we are finally going to get some of the ARPA funds into the community. An RFP was released on July 14th. We closed August 14th. We had 9 applicants submit proposals, and 4 just were awarded a total of $32,054. Next slide. So thus far, we have measured the following in our work. As you can see on the slide, we have advertised and received over 34,000 views. We have blog posts. She has had over 54 shoreline conversations, and many people have expressed appreciation for the new updated fish advisory handout. We're getting our first RFP process completed, and agencies have been awarded the grant, and that's one of the biggest milestones to date to get this money in the hands of our community partners to do some of this good work. We are excited to work with our partners that have stepped forward and can't wait to see how this impacts our community. We're striving to see the needs of the people, looking for information on PFAS. We're also excited to learn from the work what will be happening through our community partners, and are planning a second round of community funding that is intended to build on the work that will be starting soon.
Great, thanks so much, Moni and Chi. Ariel?
Hello, everyone. Good evening. So our violence prevention funding, again, thank you so much for investing in the work that we are doing. Those dollars are mostly used to support our violence prevention program in 2 major aspects. The first being advancing the goals, objectives, and priorities within the Madison and Dane County Violence Prevention Roadmap to Reducing Violence, lengthy title, and getting dollars out in the community, specifically to community-based organizations who are providing both programming and services that are in direct alignment with the advancement of some of those roadmap goals. And secondary is supporting some of the behind the scenes infrastructure to both our violence prevention unit and team, and to building some of the ecosystem around violence prevention that we would like to see in our community. So today I'm going to give more of an update on the Violence Prevention Grant Program, which is the program that supports putting those dollars in our community towards community-based organizations that are advancing our roadmap priorities. So far, through both of our combined RFPs, so we put out one RFP in 2022, and we put out another one earlier this year in 2023. And through that, we've been able to fund 13 organizations. I have them listed here, and I definitely want to give them a shout out. Moms on a Mission, Rape Crisis Center, Allied Wellness Center, the YWCA of Madison, Madison Public Library Foundation, Dear Diary, Unidos Against Domestic Violence, African Center for Community Development, Dane MAC, the Dane County District Attorney's Office, Meadowwood, Operation Fresh Start, and Urban Triage. And through this, we've been able to allocate almost $750,000 towards efforts that each of these organizations are working on. And it spans a variety of prevention efforts, both upstream prevention factors and also direct service, and also some response to those who may be victims of violence.
Thanks, Ariel. And then we're going to transition to EDD, Matt.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to provide the EDD update on ARPA-funded programs, touching on the SBER program, building improvement grants, the public market, and neighborhood business district support. Next slide, please. For our Small Business Equity and Recovery, or SBER programs, we have several sub-programs that are included within the broader SBER effort. And I'm going to touch on this afternoon some of the results in 2023. Our Commercial Ownership Assistance Program, which assists historically disadvantaged entrepreneurs with purchasing commercial property. We've closed on one of these grants this year, and we have 3 additional ones that are in the pipeline, one of which you approved this evening. Our next program that is utilizing ARPA funding is the Business Ready program. This is going to be the program that we're going to work with a cohort of entrepreneurs to provide wraparound services to help them move from having an idea for a business to hopefully having a successful business within the city. We issued an RFP to partner with a service provider to help manage the program. Those proposals were due last week, and we hopefully will have someone selected in October to manage that program. Our Facade Improvement Grant Program utilizes ARPA dollars, and we've closed on 3 facade grants this year, and will likely continue to spend down those funds in 2024. Next slide, please. Our Kiva Madison program continues to be underway. We provide some of the administrative support to that program. Our pop-up shop program is continuing likely through 2023. And then our building improvement grant program, we have actually completed the ARPA portion of this program. And if you continue the next slide. Through ARPA, we funded 32 grants for $1.2 million. Even though the building improvement grant program, the ARPA portion is completed, we will still continue this program on utilizing tax increment financing in various TIF districts throughout the community. Next slide. And here's just an example of some of the projects that we funded with the ARPA dollars. Next slide, please. Madison Public Market, the ARPA dollars were used to provide financial support to the foundation for its operations. Some key dates in the weeks ahead relative to the public market. The bids close next week, Thursday, September 7th. And so we will know then what the final cost is for constructing the public market. And the Public Market Foundation is currently planning a community event on the property for September 12th. Next slide. Our Business District Support Program is also receiving funding through the ARPA program. So far, we have funded 9 organizations at about $250,000 that are providing events in business districts around the community. And you can see one example of that is the Market Madison event that'll be, it's currently occurring through September 20th. Next slide.
I think that's all I have for you, Matt.
Thank you, Christine. And thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Okay, and I'm going to turn it over to Jim and his team to talk about CDD.
Thank you, Christine. Hello, everybody. Good to be with you tonight. I was asked to be brief, so I intend to do that, and I'm happy to entertain questions at the end of this presentation if you have them. I want to begin with the $2.5 million that was allocated to put toward the purchase of property currently owned by the Salvation Army and located in the Darbo neighborhood. After a recent change in leadership at the Salvation Army, conversations are now underway between city staff and Salvation Army staff with regard to the details of a purchase and lease agreement for that property. And a reminder that the proceeds from the sale would go toward the planned construction of a new shelter and administrative facility that the Salvation Army is planning on the 600 block of East Washington Avenue. Second, CDD is in the midst of an RFP process that is seeking a development partner to construct and operate an affordable housing project at 1202 South Park Street that would include housing for youth who are aging out of the foster care system. We've received 3 responses to that RFP. It is now closed. Those responses are currently under review by city staff and are scheduled to be presented next month, both to the CDBG committee and to residents of the Bay Creek neighborhood. Occupy Madison has secured a contractor to undertake the installation of solar panels at its 2 locations at Aberg Avenue and North 3rd Street. That work is scheduled to occur this fall. Some $400,000 of ARPA funds had been allocated to support administrative expenses related to the Dane Core program, the emergency rental assistance program that the city administered. But when other federal funds became available for this purpose, we shifted these expenses out of ARPA and into it, leaving about 80% of the ARPA funds available for other uses. And the leading candidates for those other uses are, as they have previously been, support for the ongoing operational costs for the temporary men's shelter currently at Zaire Road and the city campground at Dairy Drive. And we expect the potential reallocation of these and other unused ARPA funds to be a point of discussion during the 2024 budget process. But we have and continue to do everything that we can to preserve ARPA funds that are not being used for the purposes that they were originally intended, to preserve those funds, to extend our ability to support those 2 facilities into the future. And you did approve earlier tonight a small step in that direction by transferring funds that were left over from Federal CARES Act into the men's shelter operation, thereby freeing up a portion of the dollars allocated in 2023 from ARPA funds. Next slide, please, Christine. With regard to ARPA funds administered by CDD in the areas of emerging needs and violence prevention and youth engagement, most or all of those funds have either been used or they are under contract in the process of being used by community partners to whom funds were awarded, some last year, some earlier this year. The June 30th quarterly report, upon which the summaries that you saw earlier in this presentation does not capture a fair amount of activity that has occurred since. So the amount of unspent or unencumbered funds are likely a bit overstated, and we do expect most of these funds to be used by the end of the year. So I will stop there. And I guess we're holding questions till the very end.
Yep. And I just had one more slide that thank you to all the staff who presented updates. The slide just has a quick reference of the various resolutions that authorize the use of ARPA funds. As a few folks have mentioned, there have been other resolutions since that have authorized specific contracts or partnerships. And so they're not all listed here, but if you have any interest in going back to the original project plans or reports, you can find the links on this final slide. And with that, I think all of the staff who presented are still on for any questions.
Thanks, Christine, and thanks to everybody. Are there questions for any of the staff? Alder Rummel?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess Jim kind of answered my question as it was percolating, but did we allocate all the funds and then there's just some that didn't get spent for a variety of reasons? Or is there still an RFP RFP process for some remaining portion of funds for the upcoming period.
Alder, are you asking specifically about the youth employment funds?
No, I mean, of course I'm interested in housing, but whatever. I'm just generally thinking, were they all allocated? Now we're just sort of over time doing the RFPs, finding the agencies to help us, or are we
Yes.
still going through the RFP process with money for like another round?
No. So the council adopted a resolution detailing the sort of high level allocation of our entire allotment of ARPA funds quite a while ago now. Christine might have the actual date. And then in each of those categories, as you've heard, staff have gone to do the actual work. And some of them have moved faster than others. And in some cases, an RFP was required, and in others it wasn't. So there's no unallocated funds. But there are funds within specific projects that the council detailed that haven't been fully spent out, or that we are doing an RFP now for, as you heard. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. I mean, at first I thought you just said there's no more things, but it sounds like there could still be a RFP process for money. Is that correct? Or is it all just there? I misunderstand what you just said.
So the council set, if you go back and look at the original resolution, which is up online, the council set the projects that the ARPA funds were going to. And so you all adopted that already. Then it's within those projects. So for example, and staff will correct me if I misspeak, there's a pot of money for housing development to support youth aging out of foster care. We haven't done that yet, right? We haven't built that building yet, but we just issued the RFP for a partner to do that. So it shows up in the reporting as we haven't spent it, but we're in the process of finding the partner and putting together the project, because of course the project will cost more than the ARPA funds that we're dedicating to it. And that's underway. So that's really sort of the status of almost all of these projects. The exception, as Jim said, is where they have been able to find other sources of funding to cover things. They have been trying to save their ARPA allocation to cover the costs of running the temporary shelter and Dairy Drive, since at this point in time, we don't have any other funds to run those two facilities. And so they've been trying to save and then redirect ARPA funding to those two projects as much as possible.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Alder Harrington McKinney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to clarify what you were saying. For those ARPA funds that have not been totally allocated, they are being redirected to specifically those two homeless entities. And so is that consistent? I mean, will other projects be included in that or considered, or are the two that you named, the men's shelter and also the dairy farm, where that extra access money is going to? I just wanted to make sure that I understood what you just said to Alder Rummel.
Yeah, Alder, it's not exactly correct. So all of the funds have been allocated. You all voted to allocate all of the funds to certain projects. So all the funds have been allocated. Not all of the funds have been encumbered or spent yet. And that's as expected. In the course of the 2024 budget process, you will see a proposal to shift some of the funds from, for example, the Dane Corps support line to the homeless shelter and Dairy Drive, because we were able to find other monies to cover the Dane Corps support. And staff would like to reallocate those funds to the homeless shelter and Dairy Drive, but that will happen as part of the operating budget process.
Okay, thank you. So you did clarify that the shifting of those unencumbered funds will go to those two projects. That was my question, and so you kind of nailed it down for me. Thank you.
That's our intention at this point, Alder. But as I said, it will happen as part of the operating budget process. So it will come through finance and the council, and you all will have a chance to weigh in on that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? Alder Verveer.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a couple of questions, please, for Matt, and would certainly like to thank Christine and the team for their report and for the presentations this afternoon. Hi, Matt. Could you please elaborate a little further on your statement that the pop-up shop program under SBER is likely coming to a conclusion?
Yes. So we, as I think most individuals know, have a pop-up shop called the Culture Collectives on State Street that was intended to be a temporary location in the 400 block of State Street. We are still really in the process of determining what the future of that space will be, and really no firm determination has been made at this point. However, that was a temporary program, and it's been in place now for, well, it will be in place for several years by the end of this year. And so we are still trying to determine if it will continue at that location, or really what the future of that program will be.
So it isn't because of the intent of the existing landlord to end our lease?
It is not, no. We at present, there are actually far fewer individuals vending out of that space than there were originally. And so it really is a matter of kind of taking a step back and asking the question, is this something that we want to try to grow and amplify, or is this a project that sort of went through its natural life cycle and we just will not move forward with it? That's what we're still kind of grappling with.
Thank you, Matt. I understand that. Is this likely something that the Economic Development Committee will be discussing in the near future? Or do you see this more as a staff decision?
I mean, I think once we kind of have an idea of the direction that we're heading, I think we probably will take it to the Economic Development Committee to get their input. But we're not really ready at this point to have that conversation.
Thank you. I understand. I certainly have noticed anecdotally that we unfortunately have fewer merchants there, entrepreneurs than when we first started, and hopefully it's for good reasons and not negative reasons. But in any event, I have one other somewhat related question, and that is if you can share with us the future of the downtown vacant storefront art program that obviously was funded with $100,000 of ARPA funds. And I realize that it wasn't solely your division that was working on this, but if you could give us an update on that, I'd appreciate it. If there's any progress.
I mean, we're not proceeding with that program. We were unable to identify property owners that were interested in working with us on hosting art within their vacant spaces. And so we are reallocating that funding to the Neighborhood Business District Support Program largely, and some of the other ARPA efforts that I mentioned, because we just had really no interest on the part of property owners to participate.
I see. I honestly wasn't aware of that. When was that decision made?
I mean, it was sort of made for us in that we kept reaching out and no one responded back to us that they were interested.
Was it, out of curiosity, was it your staff that did the outreach, or was it the arts administrator and her staff?
It was both. It was economic development working with planning division staff, working with the bid as well.
I see. And so in looking at the report, that's, technically what's in our agenda, that's on page 49, it implies that the $100,000 will still be used for this endeavor, and that the project will be underway and completed in the third quarter of this year. So, I heard Jim certainly say that their report that's on our agenda is behind and doesn't cover any activities, any obligations, expenditures made recently. If this decision was made a while ago, perhaps the report needs to be updated.
Yes, that we must have missed that when we were looking through the report.
So staff was the ones that determined where the $100,000 would go? Would be reappropriated? My recollection is that yes, we knew that we weren't receiving any interest there, and so we just decided to reallocate the funds to other areas. All right, thanks very much, Matt. Appreciate it.
And just one note of clarification, that the formal change would be coming up in the 24 budget. So it actually, I guess technically the change hasn't happened yet, but certainly the program isn't happening because there wasn't interest, but the actual formal change will be part of the 24 budget process.
For expenditures in the next fiscal year?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for the clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mayor. That's all.
Thank you, Alder. Other questions? If not, thank you all again. And we'll look for the next round of updated reporting this fall. And that will take us to item 14, which is the capital budget briefing schedule. Christine?
Hey, hi, everyone. This will be very brief. I just wanted to share the schedule for the upcoming meetings. As you all know, the executive capital budget is going to be released on Tuesday, September 5th. And then the next finance committee meeting will be the meetings where the agencies will present to you all what is in their executive budget, and you'll have a chance for questions and answers. So the meeting on Monday, September 11th, will start with regular business. After that concludes, we'll move to the briefings. We'll start with Library Monona Terrace, the PCED agencies, public safety and public health, and end with finance and the zoo with administration. And then on Tuesday, we'll also start at 4:30. This meeting does not have any regular business. It's just a continuation of the briefings. There's no public comment at this meeting. We'll continue with the administration agencies and then do transportation, public works, and engineering. This schedule has been posted to the Legistar file for this discussion item. It'll also be posted as a public notice in the papers. One other thing to note is that the September 11th meeting, Dave will be giving an overview of the debt sale. And in the past, there's been a special finance committee meeting at 6 o'clock right before a common council meeting, either the last meeting of September or the first meeting of October. Dave sent out an email on Friday explaining the change in the debt sale resolution process and using the parameters resolution instead of limiting the city to 1 day to sell debt and have the resolution done in 1 day. So he'll be providing an overview of that new process at the 9/11 meeting. And because of that, we'll be canceling the special meeting on 9/19, and we'll get that updated in Legistar this week. And just a few more notes. I had sent an email to all alders asking if you wanted print copies of the budget. So thank you to everyone who responded. If you haven't responded yet, if you can get back to me by the end of the week, that would be appreciated so we can calibrate our ordering a little bit. And Another thing I wanted to point out is that in this schedule, we typically organize the briefings by functional areas so that similar agencies are grouped together. And just to give you all a heads up that we are planning to reorganize the structure of the budget book this year so that all of the agency budgets are presented also by functional area. So PCD agencies are together, public health and public safety are together. In the past, the agency sections have been in like strict alphabetical order. So planning and CDD are on opposite ends. And I think this is a little more logical to have those like agencies together. It's also more consistent with how most municipalities present their budget. So it might look a little different, and it might be a little harder to navigate at first, but we're hoping that this will be helpful in the future so that you can compare and look at similar agencies together. So that is all I have for the update.
Thank you, Christine. Questions on the schedule or the updates? If not, that's the last item on our agenda, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
Moved and seconded. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of adjournment? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.